Alrighty, let's discuss balanced and unbalanced forces. So, force basically is required to make anything move ever, and we measure force in a unit known as newtons. Fun fact, newtons are just N is capitalized because it is named after a person, whereas other units that are not capitalized are not named after people. So, fun fact. So let's say, for example, I have a block on the floor and someone is pushing the block this way and someone is pushing the block this way. How exactly do we figure out what direction the block is going to move and with how much force? So let's say that someone is pushing the block to the right with 5 newtons of force and the other person is pushing to the left with 5 newtons of force. So because these two people are pushing the block in opposite directions, one's going to the right, one's going to the left, we would subtract these two forces to get 0. Okay, so in total, this block is not going to move since it is being pushed on either side with equal amounts of force. So the net force, what we call like the total amount of force acting on it, I'll write that down, net force is basically the total amount of force. So the total is going to be 0 newtons, and because it's not technically receiving any force, it is going to stay still. It's not going to move in either direction. We would call this balanced because it is not moving. Any force that does not move in any direction and has 0 newtons as its net force is going to be balanced. Now let's say we have the same block and this person is pushing on it to the right with 10 newtons of force and the other person is pushing it to the left with 5 newtons of force. Now they're still going in opposite directions, so we're still going to subtract them. It would be 10 minus 5 equals 5. So our net force is going to be 5 newtons. Now what direction is it going in? The arrow going to the right is bigger. It has more force attached to it, so it is going to move to the right. So 5 newtons to the right is going to be your final answer there. Your final answer must include the number, the unit, and the direction in order to count. The only way you don't have to write the direction if it is 0. If it's 0 newtons, then obviously it's not going to be moving in any direction, so you don't need to include a direction. But for these cases, you have to have the number, unit, and direction. Now, because this block is actually moving, we are going to say that this is an unbalanced force. Okay, an unbalanced force is anything that causes movement where the net force is not 0. Okay, so let's look at another example. Say we have another block, someone's pushing on it in this direction with a force of 5 newtons, and someone is also pulling it in that same direction with a force of 5 newtons. So these arrows are going in the same direction, so what do? We add them now because they're going in the same direction. So 5 plus 5 is 10 newtons, and because they are both pulling and pushing the block to the right, it would go to the right. So that would be your net force. Final answer again, number, unit, direction. And this would still be unbalanced because the block is moving. All right, we'll do one more. Have the block. Let's say someone is pulling it this way with a force of 5 newtons and someone is pushing it this way with a force of 10 newtons. We're facing the opposite direction now, but they're still going in the same direction. They're both going to the left now, so we still add them. 5 plus 10 is 15 newtons, and since they're both pointing to the left, the block is moving to the left. This would be your net force. Number, unit, direction. And again, it is unbalanced because it is moving. Now, say, for example, I have multiple force pairs. Let's say someone's pushing the block this way with 5 newtons, this way with 5 newtons, this way with 5 newtons, and this way with 5 newtons. Now, forces always act in pairs, so you need to think of these 4 numbers as acting in a pair. So don't worry about the one on top and bottom yet. Worry about the ones going horizontal. With the ones going horizontal, they're going in opposite directions. So 5 minus 5 is 0. So 0 newtons going horizontal. Don't need to include a direction because it's just 0. And then we go to the top and the bottom. Treat that as a pair. Again, going in opposite directions. So 5 minus 5 is still 0. So this block is balanced. It is not moving in any direction because they're all acting in opposite directions together. But if you ever have a problem like this, you need to give me 2 different numbers for the 2 different pairs. We'll do one more. So again, for example, let's say 5 newtons to the right, 5 newtons, and 5 newtons. Okay, so again, think of them as pairs. Do the horizontal one first. They're acting in the same direction. They're both going to the right, so that would be 5 plus 5 equals 10 newtons to the right for the horizontal pair. And then you go to the vertical pair. They're both pointing down, so we add them together again. 5 plus 5 plus 10 newtons, and both of the arrows are pointing down, so we would say down. And these would be my 2 net forces for this block.